Oh, so you have like Asian hair.
Yeah.
Is it thick too?
I'm glad you said it. I didn't want to say it.
So do you have a problem when you cut your hair short and then it grows out? Does it spike?
Yep.
You have Asian quality hair.
He said it. I didn't say it.
Has no East or Southeast Asian person told you this?
No, only hairdressers. And I've been like, well, I can't repeat that, right?
Hey, it's another Wednesday, which means there's another Conversation with podcast. Welcome back. If you're new here, this is the podcast where I'm essentially just trying to relearn how to talk to other people, especially people that I find interesting that I invite on. And today's conversation is with Eugene Lee Yang. He's probably best known as 1/4 of the TryGuys. They were with BuzzFeed, now they're independent. So I invited him in. I wanted to just learn more about him. He was very interesting to me, which is also part of the reason why this is the longest podcast that we've done so far. We literally talked for 2 hours straight, which actually on that note, there's literally no other place that I can sneak this sponsor, which by the way, oh my God, first sponsored episode of A Conversation With. And so yeah, I wanted to thank today's sponsor, Dollar Shave Club. We all know Dollar Shave Club has you covered for all your grooming needs. You got things for your shower, oral care, deodorants, and most importantly, shaving. And this holiday season, they also have your back for all your gifting needs too. From awesome members' favorite gift sets to gift cards and more, Dollar Shave Club has something for everyone. They even sent me their shave starter set that I've been using for a while now. I gotta say, it's really nice to keep in this office for when I need to quickly get ready for a shoot like this one. Included, you get the executive handle and blades and a 1-ounce tube of Dr. Carver's shave butter. But main point, when you want to snag some awesome and at the same time support this show, go to dollarshaveclub.com/Phil, where all you beautiful bastards can get your shave starter set for only $5. And maybe while you're at it, you get some holiday gift sets too. But with all of that said, enjoy the conversation.
Hey, welcome back to A Conversation With. My name is Philip DeFranco, and today we're having a conversation with Eugene Lee Yang. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I realized we haven't met in person before.
This is the only way that can be a part of the conversation where you're like, I realized we're talking now, never met you.
Yeah, well, I always thought you were a cool guy, so this is an honor to be here.
Really, you did? Because
I don't find most people cool.
I will take that, whether it be true praise or not, because I was thinking back and I was like, oh shit, this is going to be kind of fun because I've been learning more and more about you, kind of in anticipation of this, but also more so after you guys left BuzzFeed. But I've definitely been guilty of villainizing the TryGuys in the past.
Oh, I mean, you are more than welcome to. Yeah, I mean, I don't hold my previous employer in any sort of negative light because we were contractually obligated to be what we were. But I certainly can understand the criticisms.
But no, it wasn't really about part of the, if you said it was like about the content or views, that's probably like some jealousy in there, right? I think that there's always going to be a little bit of that, or you're just like, oh, it's this corporate thing. But I remember specifically, we were up for, I took it way too serious. I feel like it was like 3 years ago. We were up for Audience Choice of the Year for the Streamies.
Oh.
And anytime I promoted, I was like, guys, you have to help us beat the TryGuys. They're BuzzFeed. Don't support the corporation.
Yeah.
But no, but then the more that I found out about you guys, I was like, I really like these guys. Especially your story is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Not to completely shit on everybody else.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I certainly sort of stumbled upon digital content really out of the blue. I was really focused on becoming a filmmaker, doing writing and directing, went to USC Film School and was sort of doing the hustle and grind here in LA, waitering, directing music videos, commercials.
Oh, wow.
Didn't have a full-time job for 5 years. And so BuzzFeed Video happened to start. I knew someone who worked in the New York office and ended up being one of the first video producers there.
Oh, wow.
When it was like not a viral star thing. It was clearly, do you have hands and a voice? And so that's how I came into the fold there.
Did you go in pre-Zay Frank then?
No, Zay Frank was there, yeah. I think there was about maybe a year where they're kind of figuring things out, but I really entered along with the other TryGuys who I'm most known for.
Sure.
In regards to a group, we went there when it just at the beginning was starting to make an impact online with views, and certainly was still in a very cool experimental phase prior to being more talent forward.
Yeah. Hearing that you went to film school definitely makes sense. I watched it again this morning, your video on all the effort that went into your coming out video.
Yeah.
And that's wild. I don't know if I've put that much effort into anything, but I think it also probably speaks to how important it was to you.
Yeah. Well, I think effort is relative, right? So I think for me, what's interesting is that the exhaustion I feel from something like that kind of combines a lot of artistic disciplines that I have backgrounds in. It was an emotional effort, but certainly for work, I thrive on being able to be in a more traditional filmmaking space. I like the stress and the hectic nature of a film set and sort of running that. But I certainly feel maybe more stressed doing basic YouTuber things.
Really?
Yeah, I'm terrible at self-promotion.
Well, it sounds like I've seen some of your stuff where you hate it. It's not that you're bad at it. It seems like you hate it.
Yeah, I think I've been able to sort of channel some of my like natural disdain and self-hatred into a more or less a character that people can relate to. But certainly a lot of my natural inclinations as someone who was very othered and dark growing up, never imagined that I would be in any sort of the sense of the word like authentic or relatable. But certainly bringing it back to BuzzFeed where I used to work, that really flipped my entire journey on its head, where suddenly I guess everything I did was considered relatable. Although that's such a opaque, vague word now to be using for anything on.
But do you
online,
feel like BuzzFeed relatability? I know that is something that you've kind of. What word did you use? It was something make the content digestible. Do you feel like that was? Oh no, I saw.
Yeah,
you
no, it's good. It was. I think it comes more naturally to others, and I think that was also a time online where, you know, those corporate entities, as you called them, which it's true. There was that weird time, even like 2014, where it was this question of is BuzzFeed versus Gawker, who has the soul of the internet? What's the tone in which the young millennials are moving forward?
Yeah.
And you know, company culture, at the very least, I always honor what happened with BuzzFeed as they prized diverse voices. They were really pushing that sort of aspect, which was fantastic. However, to sort of put a bow on every video and to sort of have to like Mr. Rogers your way out of any sort of content was not second nature to me. It was, I personally have a strong nihilistic viewpoint of the world. Maybe it's because I'm a Capricorn, or maybe just because I'm angry inside. But I certainly learned that your own tone or your negative experiences or outlooks don't equate to being unrelatable. It's just a different type of relatability.
Okay.
And so it was a very hard, tough learning ground for me to understand that there is an elegant way to reach an audience that wants to connect to that side of you without being a total dick, you know?
Do you feel like, so if you think of relatability while you were at BuzzFeed versus relatability now that you guys are on your own, what's the two differences, or the difference between the two pieces of content?
Yeah, I think that one, having full ownership of our company as the TryGuys is great, because on every level we are the final gatekeepers of what goes out. So should I stand as firm behind something or behind even a comment in a video I make, then we can make that happen. We can make sure that people see what we want on screen. Sure. And I think when it was with BuzzFeed, they're you know, they are a company, and therefore standards and regulations are in place. So everything had a certain amount of red tape, which I think it just comes with jobs.
Sure. Yeah.
So I wouldn't fault them. I would just fault corporate structure. And, you know, hey, maybe one day in 5 years, the TryGuys company is going to be bullshitting some employees about like, you got to make this, you got to fucking take off your pants and act like a goofball or whatever. But certainly I would hope that we learned enough where we keep things, you know.
In 3-4 years, there's going to be that a wave of why I left the TryGuy videos for people that you've hired.
I can't wait for that. I would revel in that. I would find that so fascinating.
That's when you're like, I made it.
Yeah.
As long as it's not like a company destroying. You're like, we did it.
Yeah, no, I think the other big thing is that the biggest change that happened when we left and started our company was we didn't realize, you know, everything we did at BuzzFeed was self-produced, and, you know, we owned it in essence of who created it, and certainly using ourselves as the on-screen talent. But we weren't aware of the YouTube community at large outside of that, because even, as you said, at the Streamies, we also felt a certain like separation from everyone. Sure. Because we weren't sure how the corporate entities and the talents that came from there were being regarded. And that separation also reverberated through how we sort of communicated in the comment sections, or who we could see in person. We were very distant from it. There was an arm's length, because, you know, when you work for a company, it's good to have those types of rules in place to avoid anything becoming too intimate or too personalized. Sure. But when we left, then suddenly we were aware of the impact we had made, and became way more in control with being in direct communication with people who actually followed us or learned from us or wanted to see more from us. So I think that's been probably the greatest benefit, is understanding the sort of true worth of, I think, what a lot of us do online, which is what is the impact and how is that actually helping people who are watching in some way, whether they're laughing or they're learning or connecting with me as like a gay person of color.
Sure.
I didn't get to read that so directly when I worked for a company. And now it's a huge part of my job to honor that and be more directly communicative with people who take their time to watch what I do.
Well, that's one of the things I was going to ask, and maybe it's more so now because you're not with BuzzFeed. What do you personally get out of creating these videos and doing the live shows and pretty much any extension of what you're putting out there?
What do I get out of it? I should say that I do love performance. I do love performing. I've come to very much appreciate the privilege I have to have people come see us perform live or watch our videos. But for me, it's really become a question of really what is the impact I'm doing through story and through, in this situation, presenting myself through videos.
Right.
And a big part of me becoming a filmmaker and going to film school was this idea that I had a very strong perspective and a unique story that I wanted to tell that hopefully other people, regardless of if they are from my background, could react to or connect with. And the ways in which I can do that directly online is essentially kind of, I think, just a different version of that same sort of creative gift. Is just packaged slightly more in a more accessible way than, say, if I was to go make a feature or a TV. So yeah, I think for me, it's always making sure that what I'm putting out there is enriching a community that I want to reach, and or making people even see communities I'm from differently by presenting myself as a very like honest, authentic, however dark I may be person.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, kind of speaking to, it doesn't necessarily have to be people with your background, but sometimes also for that. And it could be kind of a dumb question. But when it comes to representation, right, because it definitely sounds like you're so appreciative of the opportunity to be able to share a voice. Do you feel like sometimes you get locked in a box? Just because when I was watching some of the podcasts, it feels like, and obviously, you want to share a new viewpoint, but it feels like a lot of people accidentally kind of just lock you in this box of give us only answers that relate to you being a gay Asian man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that comes with the territory of, I mean, let's be frank here. The TryGuys are 3 straight white guys and me, the gay Asian guy. So certainly, and this was the same, even say in a company structure, you feel the weight of responsibility to have to speak for those groups because you as the sole person, the sort of gatekeeper, so to speak, of those cultures in that product, you want people to know that they're represented. And sometimes I think, and BuzzFeed was certainly very guilty of this, it could come off as preachy. It could come off as feeling like you're checking off a box. And the most I can hope for is that when I bring it up, it's become more naturally integrated into the conversations, because very luckily, the other guys who are my best friends are clearly very open and very communicative about those issues. However, I do know that it is just a fault of the context in which I'm usually portrayed in, which is as the minority. Yeah. Okay. So I think that when I'm in solo situations, and say if I'm doing something like expressing myself through other words of other modes of creative expression, I won't have that bear that weight as much. But I wouldn't blame the other guys or even my situation for that. I think it's just what happens in those spaces. You bring up race in a room and you have one person of color, that person is going to feel like they're going to have to represent everyone. Yeah. The way in which they do it, I think, is very important in terms of how we discuss things these days. But for me, especially being in sort of a spotlight of sorts, you also feel that you have to say things and express things with the confidence and the ownership and the sort of, for lack of a better term, like, fuck you if you don't agree, because I have to like make sure that our community is heard and represented. Sure. So it's a little like, it's a delicate dance that's, I think, very, very much, I don't know, there's a lot of like minefields.
I was going to say, do you feel like there have been times that you stepped on a mine? Because it's such an alien situation to me, because no one's ever been like, well, Phil said something and in some way I'm the representative for the white community. Like no one's, that's not a situation I ever deal with.
Yeah, no, I think it's always I'm in minefield because in the end, I think as for me as an artist, it's very important for me to always express my personal perspective, but it's also within my responsibility to look at where I'm most well equipped to reach the people that should or could be changed by what I'm saying or doing. And in my case, and I speak about this sometimes, before I even happened to stumble into digital, I was a like run and gun through the minefield type creative. I was, my thesis at film school was a school shooting dance musical.
Wow.
And it was playing with these different terms about who politically in power is creating this and who at home is creating these types of monsters. And it was, we screened it. It happened to be screened 2 weeks after Virginia Tech happened. But I'd already finished it and the professors decided to screen it. And that was my first like audience experience where I had half the audience booing. And it was, I kind of felt like, oh, this is my lot in life, right? I have a very like no holds barred creative approach. And maybe this is how I will be as a filmmaker. And then when I started in digital, it sort of like 180'd everything, where I was forced to take all of those perspectives and views and feelings and see how can I say or package it in a way where everyone will listen to it, or at least accept the beginning of my argument. I say it best is like if you're at a party with strangers. Before I was probably the person who got drunk and just screamed about something, and half the people would love me, and then half the people would hate me, which I did a lot when I was in college, in real life. And then at BuzzFeed, it's more you go in and you are in a suit and you're smiling at everyone and you are saying very like digestible things, but they happen to like, slide in a little bit of your perspective, but certainly they want you to be palatable. And so now coming back to what I feel like is what I'm responsible for within my career at this point is sort of combining the two. I certainly respect and can never do what a lot of people do online, which is represent those who are still running through the minefields and like, being the banner wavers for communities that need those voices.
Sure.
But I've managed to get into homes and be entrusted with someone's grandma in the Midwest and a baby in Asia. Like people are watching what we do and they can connect with me on a very basic human level. So if I have that audience, then I certainly feel that my carefulness is not really, it's less about my perspective and more about the grace in which I sort of communicate it. And I want to make sure that audience that has connected with me, regardless of their background, can at least like consider hearing me out.
It sounds like the way that you're thinking of it, whether it be kind of planned or not, that it was kind of like Trojan horsing acceptance or understanding of something different rather than, because something that I heard you've talk about was you didn't bash people that were online kind of being righteous, right? And kind of taking swings because, I think right now is still a pivotal time of change and pushback. And it's been really interesting, but hearing you explain it that way, it gives me even a little bit more understanding. But do you feel like that was kind of happenstance just because of the way that you were initially introduced and then kind of revealing more and more of yourself after people kind of just understood you as a person rather than this thing that you hadn't shared?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think that a lot of it feels like it's happenstance, but then I take a big step back and think about what my actual background is. And I grew up as one of the only Asian families when I was a kid in a small Texan town. And I was, raised Presbyterian. My parents kind of raised me in a more conservative Korean household. And I certainly was the only gay kid who could still hide being gay. So there was a certain amount of a me versus what I considered these like either opposing viewpoints or societal structures that I had to survive within. And then certainly when I went to college, I had the flip side where I retaliated and all of my like pent up rage came out through myself as an artist, which I still value that. But the navigation based on not only survival, but also to get myself to the next higher place for people to also see me as someone who was valid and as someone who could also be competitive.
Right.
Took a lot of social, I wouldn't want to call it graces or tact because I don't think people should feel like they should do that. But I had to be very empathetic to a lot of people that I probably would never have wanted to listen to in the first place. But I think that it's important for me and I don't speak for other people of color, especially, for me to hear others out, to know if there's a way that I can maybe change their mind if I really strongly believe something is for the better good. The best example I can say about that is my own family, where you have, you know, parents who will vote for Trump, or you have close loved ones who have very strong opposing ideological views, say even about my sexuality. You know, there's a lot of situations where you should cut people out like that. But there are also other situations where maybe there is some fence sitting and maybe they just need a little bit of support in their own journey in the right direction. And so it's a longer grind and it's a much harder harder thing to do, and it takes a lot of patience. But I've had some success in getting people to accept me more fully as I am, which I think was attributed partially because I was more patient with hearing about where they came from. And, you know, I think that it's tough because these days we see how sort of the online environment and the ways in which we communicate with each other has been so sort of, we've been pushed to the extremes in a lot of situations. And I think that the grayness in which I think most people end up really socializing and the way in which we interact in real life is lost when it comes to how you speak online. And so, I don't know, I think the most I try to do is represent a little more of that gray, uncertain area with the way I'm portraying myself and the way that I speak, because I think that's more accurate to the way that people are in real life. And I think that once you find out something about someone that is just completely like, it's a no-go for you should not be associated with this person, then you need to not be around that. But I don't know. I think that we've lost a certain amount of giving each other chances. And I certainly would never have worked with the other three TryGuys had we had not been the only guys in the office who were willing to be in women's underwear for that first video.
Well, I was going to say, I think that when you're talking about like the best way to get people together, right? Especially if it's going to be, we're going to try and do interesting stuff, is come up with this thing that people would think is wild or different or just in a different category than just like, I'm tasting different teas video. And who's going to say yes? Right. That's like that, especially if I don't know how many people were working at the company, but yes is the most important thing to say out here when it comes to, I think, a creative idea. So the fact that it shows, I think, hunger and openness. Right. And so there wasn't like a fifth Try Guy, right?
No. I think it was
like
hunger, openness, and probably a certain amount of vanity, I'm sure. We're like, yeah, I'll be on camera. I'll take off my pants and put on some Victoria's Secret.
Easy, done.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that was the magic sort of element in which we sort of cast ourselves, which was we were just so implicitly open to experiencing something new and then kind of making fun of ourselves, which is, I think, the bread and butter of the brand. But yeah, I would never have even really, I think, become best friends with them without what we've been through as business partners and as collaborators, because they were not necessarily the people I would be immediately drawn to in a general setting, which they know that too. They were always like thinking I was too intimidating to talk to,
really, or
off-putting because I was, you know, very much like constantly, you know, pushing and talking about, you know, racial issues and LGBT, especially in the videos I was first producing. But that's kind of a good example of you kind of never know sometimes with people in a real life situation if you're going to get along with them or not.
That's really interesting to wonder like how many people you could get along with fantastically, but you just haven't given yourself a reason to have that first 30-minute conversation.
Yeah.
To kind of go back to when you were talking about how angry you kind of were when you moved out here. Are you glad that you weren't born like 10 or 15 years later? Because I think about that every now and then. I'm like, I wouldn't have a career if the stuff that I was sharing on MySpace was being shared on TikTok and was being shared on Twitter and YouTube.
Yeah, it's strange because even we saw the change in that when we worked at BuzzFeed. When we came in, it was a producer's job. We were behind the scenes talent. And then within the 4 to 5 years we were there, it became clear that people were coming in for the hopes of being on-screen talent. It was a distinct shift that happened, I think.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's a certain amount of, I don't know, I don't envy younger people because I'm 33. So,
same,
yeah. Oh, 33 exactly?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. When's your birthday?
December 1st.
I'm January 18th.
All right, I'll hit it first. I'll let you know.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't really understand the weight in which I think kids these days value their self-worth through social media until I started experiencing it myself. Because I was like not a social media person before I joined BuzzFeed. I started all of my platform sort of participation once I did it just for the job.
Sure.
But yeah, I think I was probably just born in the right time to sort of feed a different, slightly different era, I think, of self-loathing, which is not through the approval of other people.
Yeah.
I had just the classic in your face, like bullying, and whoever just didn't like me. And I had to deal with that mainly because of me being both what I am as a queer person of color, but really also because I was just a weird person. I was a weird kid. But
then you could go home and it wouldn't follow.
Yeah,
you.
I could go home and, you know, and then deal with my own family, which is like a whole other thing.
Different thing, yeah.
But you know, it's interesting because it's both an escape for kids and then also a huge burden. And I think that's why in the end, having these diverse voices cut through the noise, as the cup says, is good, because I think that, you know, I recently joined TikTok on a whim.
Okay.
Because I was just like, okay, why not? Because I have to catch myself when I feel like, oh, I'm the stodgy old guy, because I refuse to join it. I was just like, no.
Yeah, but you have like a sense of cool about you.
I don't know.
Like if I go on there, I gotta up it. I gotta be the weird old guy.
I think I was very fascinated with how this platform was actually, because what made me do it was, one, I take Halloween very seriously. And this past Halloween, I was what we call an Ajumma in Korean culture, which is like the auntie. Okay. So every culture has like an auntie look, and Asians have, if you drive through K-Town, you'll see it's like the visor with the mismatched floral prints and the umbrella, aversion to sunlight. And I was in like full prosthetics and a suit, and I was kind of dancing around, and I thought, oh, this is bizarre and like just sort of like low quality enough for me. Someone just put a cell phone and put it on something like TikTok, which has the echoes of things like Vine and Musical.ly. But what's interesting is when you're on the app now, you see the sort of the democratizations at its current state a little better, because I'll constantly be running across people with like 0 followers.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting because I'm like, oh, that's cool. I like to see people I would never have seen. But certainly, like any other platform and like entertainment at larger media, the biggest stars are, how should I put this in a politically correct way? They're like traditionally attractive white teenagers.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's just a lot of like
yeah,
hot white teens on the app, which is like more power to them. But certainly those types of moments make me realize, oh, that's why you need these alternative voices and faces just to be out there on any level, social media or on the big screen. Just because we're still in an era where there is a reason why people are fighting for those spaces, because it's just not what people, especially in this country or even globally, are immediately inclined to watch.
Yeah. Specifically with TikTok, I'm just wondering, I feel like there are people that kind of like started out as a joke. There are people that start out with kind of every now and then, but it feels like the people that are the biggest have an output that I don't understand. And I say that as someone that puts out like a 20-minute video every day.
Yeah.
It looks like it's just the constant fight to not fall off, where people are uploading 3-4 things a day.
Yeah.
Even though it's hard to tell because they don't, I think they put the date on it, which is really weird. And I feel like it lends itself to people stealing content.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things I think I've talked about it for about a month and a half. I still haven't done it just because I'm going to do 3 things and then never use it again.
I would suggest maybe just joining to look at it.
I look through it,
and
that's where, and so that's why I have a general understanding. I've heard the same fucking 10 seconds of about 9 different songs, like just over and over.
Yeah.
But there's something that's
it's
kind
the
of
same fucking songs.
Yeah, but there's something that's like, I like when like someone, it feels almost like this group project where it's like, okay, everyone's kind of copying this meme, and then someone pivots, and then everyone follows that thing. And what sucks is like the people that change the whole ecosystem usually just get ripped off by the people that you just talked about. But you might be onto something there, which makes it currently unique, which is that the stealing or rip-off accusations that would plague something like Twitter, YouTube, Instagram even, doesn't really exist on TikTok, because that's so much of it's based on trends. So I think they find the originator of a trend, but right now it does feel more community based, because it's just more someone creates the trend and then it's your personal interpretation, or you just putting your face
or value into it, and then everyone loves it. So it's interesting because it does go against this idea of ownership.
Sure.
I mean, the whole app is like copywritten music, so I don't know when that is going to get into legal weeds. And it's owned by China, so I don't even know like what that even has to, what the implications of that is.
I just like that I get to talk about it because there are like investigations into whether it's like this.
I don't know. I'm also, again, bringing back to my core beliefs. I think that most everything has a sinister underbelly, or there's something there that I don't quite trust. But I'm trying to like take a step back from that and see what is the value for, you know, young people and older people like using this. What do they like about it? And that's what's more fascinating to me is the sort of the social value, the currency that people are getting out of that. And yeah, the sharing is I think what's particularly unique about that. People don't seem to be up in arms about it's starting or owning something.
Sometimes, just because it feels like if you go to the comment section, which I don't think a lot of the casual users do that are just kind of flipping, you'll see people calling it out, but it doesn't stop anything because I think most people, because it's a 5-10 second piece of content, that most people aren't like, I need to share my thoughts on this.
Yeah. It's because you can literally it
download
lists. Yeah, you can download it, but it lists on the bottom the music used or the track used by a user. So then you can click on it and then use their track. So that's why you hear the same song every time, because they're not like independently downloading it. They're literally just lifting it from another user's TikTok.
I feel like it's going to be interesting to see kind of how many SoundCloud artists kind of blow up because a lot of the clips,
that would be nice.
A lot of the clips I've never heard of, and then there will be some channel that features the artist, and I'm like, oh, okay. And so I don't know. It would be interesting to see if anything happens with the music industry, especially with how fucked the copyright claim system is on YouTube. Have you guys had to deal with anything like that? Or you know the way to navigate it? I haven't had to because I don't sing 5 seconds of a song. I don't, you know.
I mean, I think that's something where from the corporate angle, you just kind of have to understand what their business is, which is they're just going to strike anything that has even a second of something owned by Warner Brothers Music. So we avoid that just completely. And we have a couple of uploads that clearly are like live performances, like when we do VidCon performances that are pastiches of tons of copywritten material.
Sure.
But for the audience, we'll release it. We'll know we'll get a strike and we'll know that money funnels towards those companies. Sure. But that's kind of like we get it. But the biggest thing is just, I don't know, you have to unfortunately get into those, invest in a copyright free library and use those. But yeah, I don't know. You do always see there's a disconnect, I think, between the realities. And weirdly, this ties back into something like BuzzFeed, the realities of how business works at large, and the, I think, spiritual grassroots feel of what social media and places like YouTube is, which is user reliant, user dominated, and should be servicing the people who are brave or willing enough to put themselves on. And then once you get into monetization, you get into, you know, why X company is doing this or not censoring this or doing this, then it's, you look at the paperwork from a business perspective and you're like, okay, I get it. But unfortunately, I think it will always kind of go against the spirit of what it should be, which is let users be themselves. So it's tough. I always just think like, I don't know. I understood enough from having been sort of born digitally under a company structure that there have always been rules and regulations in place. But certainly I think if I had been born 15 years later and am a upstart young person of color who's queer on YouTube, I'd be much more angry about a lot of stuff that happens.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, yeah. Well, because we certainly as like creators who are considered like, I guess I don't even want to call myself a legacy creator because that sounds crazy. I consider like Jenna Marbles and like Ryan Higa and all of them. But you know, I guess we've been online for like 5 to 6 years at this point.
Yeah.
So
especially with how fast a lot of people kind of burn out or disappear.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I've always kind of referred to people as like the OG creators, but it's interesting because the people that I'm talking about, half the time, no one even knows who the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah. Isn't that strange?
Well, no, I was going to ask you about people, but because you don't know like the Renettos, Bohemes, stuff like that.
No.
Okay. Lonely Girl 15?
Yes.
So you were in that space at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting to see how it's changed. And then it feels like, I do wonder what this next generation is going to be, if it's going to be kind of more traditionally attractive, like the popular kids.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Sure.
I don't know. I think that there's a certain, I think when we look back, and this is great we're talking because I think BuzzFeed and the Voxes and the Vices and the every single company that was part of that sort of branded ad media bubble that eventually burst this past year. It was a very interesting time because prior to that, the OG YouTubers were in this space that was very like Wild West, and certainly like you get on and, you know, even trolls weren't organized. You know, it was like, oh, there's the troll in the corner and I don't know who this person is and who am I chatting with on it?
Everyone's found each other.
Everyone's found each other now. We have communities, and the viral space is like mini countries. And I think that when I started online, it was that interesting time where everyone was trying to figure out, one, what was digital in relation to traditional platforms? Two, what is there a way to corporatize personalities, which we found out not really. And then three, can we sort of see if these the democratization of the space continues where you can find these. I mean, I think everyone is kind of a little weird online, which is great. I think that's the thing I've learned to appreciate, meeting a lot of other YouTubers. But can you find these like sparks of interesting, diverse, cool, strange, sometimes controversial people that you would never have come across? And now I think it's increasingly harder to do that, namely because YouTube itself is a business, and certainly you want your business as a platform that's now competitive with streaming services and film and TV to have its marquee players. You want, you know, you don't have the golden age of cinema where they hired, you know, Marilyn for X amount of money because she guaranteed box office for no reason. Like that was part of how that business ran so well. And I think YouTube is currently kind of in that golden age of cinema model where you have like these like sort of, I don't know, monopolies over verticals even with certain figures and stars. I would even say TryGuys are probably one of those in the comedy space. And they are bankable. They are clearly have huge followings. And there's, I mean, I think about it, I'm like, there's no reason certain videos should always automatically get 50 million views when they're not great. I mean, I love all the creators usually, but it's just kind of become, okay, you give them money, you go see Tom Cruise in the 90s and yeah, of course the movie's going to make money.
Sure.
So my hope is that I think in the next generation, if we're following like my old like cinema critique studies classes, that it goes into like the 70s where the studios sort of broke down a little bit because they were like, wait a minute, we got to focus on finding new, cool, crazy people. And then you had the Spielbergs and the Scorseses sort of popping up, and Kubrick running around doing whatever the fuck he did. And I'm hoping that we start like, since we see this sort of like all-encompassing business aspect kind of taking over what the digital platforms are, that they start prizing this idea that we can use that power to find and uplift things that will actually push the medium forward, as opposed to relying on things that we see as already popular and will guarantee views or money for ads.
That's
you know?
interesting. Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, it's definitely. I think like something you touched on earlier. There's something for everyone. There's pockets all over the place, because I feel like it's just going to get more and more corporate. I mean, every day I look and I find some kind of like small time creator that has like tweaked their content, and they're all of a sudden they're signed to CAA, and then they're kind of getting funneled through the system. And I don't know. I think I used to fully hate that. But I think kind of even looking at how do you make something sustainable? How do you make it so a person doesn't burn out like so many creators that started around my time and even 6 years after, where all of a sudden you have this system that helps, but I don't know, there's something that makes it feel less than authentic. And I think that's why there'll always be massive success on the other end, right? People that are seen as kind of the outsiders, or the people that'll say kind of like, fuck the system, even if all of a sudden that's like almost, it feels like it maybe takes away to call it a shtick, but that there's always going to be that place, right? Because even you saying that you have like that super cynicism, that you have a very dark place in your head. Do you consume any kind of content that feeds that at all? Or is that something that nowadays you kind of try and keep at bay?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
as much as anyone fucking can.
Yeah. I'm certainly not too into deep diving in like the dark web stuff, but I think that I certainly appreciate and have the core personality of someone who likes to be constantly challenged. And I think that I find a lot of what is currently typically viral very unchallenging. Does that make sense? I find...
would you say that part of that ever relates or like could be attributed like to Try Guy content?
I think that, yeah, I would be remiss to not even say, taking it back to when I worked for BuzzFeed and what then we are as TryGuys. I think that we certainly have a brand that in the end is always focused on positivity and being open to cultures. But I also think that that in itself, once you do something so many times, it becomes, once something becomes a rule, a personal rule.
Okay.
I think that it immediately should, one, incite criticism and reflection, and also have more oversight about where is this actually pushing conversation, or what is this doing in regards to enriching lives. I think there is a totally fine, and this is what I call like network TV. I think it's great if you just service something over and over and over, like Big Bang Theory or whatever, that like scratches that itch. And I think that the like core of a lot of businesses, that's what you do. That's the transaction. Come here, feel good, and then go away. And I think TryGuys knows what that is. But then you'll have things like, I guess, my coming out video, where I didn't even want to put it on our platform. I honestly said, I'm just going to do it, and maybe I'll do it in the short film circuit. Maybe I'll just do it because I need to do it, and I'll like, I don't know, put it somewhere. But it was one of those moments where I said, I just have to do this because I just need to get it out of me. And the other guys were clearly very much attuned to know, like, we need to honor what you want to do, and you are part of this platform, and we're the ones defining our own channel. So my biggest fear was it's going to be too off of that, like the thing that I consider like scratching that main itch for our audience.
Well, it is always hard because I feel like the system in general punishes you deviating from what you normally do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it can have long lasting impacts on like based off of one or two videos. So do you feel like when you guys make the content that it's this balancing act of you're making the big superhero movie so that you can to like that's what people kind of know you for, so then you can kind of make an art house piece?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that a lot of it is whatever can make you support yourself in the end. And everyone's going to find this, whether
support
they're
yourself as far as money
monetarily.
Okay, yeah.
They'll find this in any business they're in, particularly in the arts, whether it be being a waiter or working for a company that you don't necessarily agree with all their perspectives, or doing something like the same type of video online. You need to be aware that unfortunately so many things come down to you being able to survive and your means.
Sure.
And ideally that will help fund, for lack of a better term, like passion projects or things that you feel like are going to be riskier. And I think that's a constant struggle for anyone who's balancing art and commerce. I think that a big tip is finding the art, joy, or challenging aspects of the things that you know will help you in regards to that like main bulk of work. For TryGuys, it is our traditional try type video.
Sure.
Finding ways to, for us in particular, it's like we are all like weird comedy people in the end. So we just always want to just be we've been really fucking weird. So if you watch the videos like now compared to when we were at BuzzFeed, it's the spirit is still there, but we're just batshit crazy. We're just fucking weirdos. And I think that's
well, I imagine,
good.
Did you get told no a lot at BuzzFeed? Well, I mean, obviously compared to now, it's going to be a completely different world because you're just going to fuel each other.
No, I think they were also very much in the
like,
boat at the time of like, we need to follow and see like how they were more, I think, against the idea of even talent being face forward.
Well, I think it's probably because there's a realization that it's like it's hard to hold on to people.
Exactly.
You can make, I don't know. I think one of the main thing, I'm glad that for a little bit I was part of a big corporate structure, no matter how fucking depressed I was at the time.
Yeah.
Because it gave me a look on the other side, because then being kind of like the leader of some sort of corporate system, you realize, oh shit. Okay.
Yeah.
So like some of that, I was being an asshole because I didn't understand the problems that management was having to deal with.
Totally. It's a fucking nightmare. It's a nightmare to be part of a system that has so much. I mean, every corporate structure is bureaucratic to a certain degree, but it's the reality of how large businesses function. I always have this quote I say is, I can tell when someone hasn't been physically punched in the face just by the way they act or carry themselves.
Sure.
But I also feel like I should
wait. So question: have I been punched in the face?
I feel like you have.
I haven't.
Really?
I say I want to, but I get very
no. You
scared.
have a certain I don't know, a certain openness about you, but also like I feel like you could hold down in a fight.
We'll
Or
see.
am I totally wrong?
We'll
Would he
see.
get the
I like
shit
that you
beat
look
out
to
of
the
him?
team like I fight them.
Oh, he would get the shit beat out of him. Oh,
Luke, I would get hurt. Oh, he's shaking his head. He
Yeah.
doesn't want to answer the question, which that gives away your answer.
well, I think I also can tell when someone hasn't been punched down occupationally. Does that make sense?
Okay.
That's another type of, I think, sobering experience as a human, which is like the idea of working under a company structure, or as I was for many years, being a waiter, or
Everyone should do it at least once.
everyone should do something like that at least once. And I think that's one other, I think, like kind of unfortunate aspect of becoming something like a YouTuber or something, is that a lot of these kids are coming up without having an experience in which they are given restrictions or boundaries. So I think entitlement is a word that's thrown out a lot, but I think that is certainly an aspect of someone that without real life sort of presenting that aspect of yourself of entitlement in real life never goes well. Like people can smell it off of you so quickly. It's fine if you're in a space where everyone loves you and praises you, but that I think is just unfortunately a harsh reality of the world, especially when it comes to businesses, to trying to like even do anything where you're trying to move up a ladder. That is when the weight of how unfortunately the real world works comes down on you. And that's when you have a lot of things where I think in some of like YouTube's defense and large companies, sometimes I think it's like unfortunately impossible problems that they're trying to appease everyone.
Oh, at that point?
Yeah. Cause then
that's
you're just
crazy.
like, well, unfortunately sometimes you have to be like, okay, I get it. This is something that you can't make everyone happy.
Yeah, I think I definitely, especially for YouTube, in the past I was kind of swing my fists everywhere, and then as
Which
I've
I
seen-
appreciated. Yeah, I think a lot of us appreciate that.
But at the same time, like especially now, like I look at situations where kids directed content is going to get fucked over.
Yeah.
No one knows how hard YouTube fought for creators against the FTC.
Yeah.
But still, when January hits, a lot of the reactions, even though it is the FTC that's doing it, it's going to be fuck YouTube. You're throwing us under the bus. Whereas it's such a hard, I can't even imagine, like they got fined $170 million, which yes, for Google isn't that much.
Yeah.
But it's an impossible situation. But when you were talking about kind of being a server, I feel like, or having to be a part of like a smaller system, I think there's something of having to bear witness to someone treating you like shit or like nothing that I think trains you to know how to deal with people in the future, because you're obviously not going to want to inflict that on someone else. But also these like 14, 15-year-olds that are having instant success on TikTok, like I wouldn't wish it on fucking anyone. The reason that I still have what I have is I failed so many fucking times.
That's right, yeah.
And I had nothing for a really long time, right? And so to just kind of be thrust into or bred into success, I feel like is I'm not going to feel bad for someone, but it's going to be a really big problem. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, because I personally think that some of the best artists or entertainers are those who clearly are still wondering why they're there or how they got there.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than, I think, there's a few exceptions, which I think are like action stars or something, where clearly you got to be muscle, you got to work for those muscles, like The Rock. I'm
Dedication.
like, yeah, I want confidence, but I think I want to see someone constantly experiencing this like existential crisis of why am I here? What gave me the privilege to have this audience? And what am I actually contributing when I'm not off helping solve things with science, or even like building something with my hands? What am I doing with something now that's immediately accessible to everyone, which is a video platform? What am I contributing to society at large? What am I even contributing to the one subscriber I have who really cares deeply about what I'm doing or what I'm going through? And I think that's something that keeps me up constantly, because that's the things that first drove me away from ever considering doing anything digital. And now it's the things that keep me in the digital sort of pool.
Sure.
Which is like, you then find that the impact you can have in these types of spaces is so monumental today. But I think it needs to still bear some weight of responsibility. And only that can be determined by the person putting out that content. And what you're hitting on, I think, is we are now in an age where I think young kids who are coming up are lacking some sort of like reproach or any sort of anything outside of the give and take, the reward of social media.
Sure.
To value what their work is.
Well, especially also because it's such an emotionally significant time, right? Just because a lot of whether it be something like my favorite kind of music, my favorite movies, shows, that's obviously affected the relationship that I had with friends and family, but also worth. Because at that time, right, I was going to school. I think since I was 15, I'm trying to remember, it's 14, 15. I just know that there was like special paperwork so I could work at McDonald's.
Yeah.
I always had some sort of job, and it kind of trains you up. And I really like getting your worth from social media at that age. I don't know what happens when you inevitably lose it. Like 90% of them will.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's not, and it's such, I mean, it was something you touched on of not only the bullying, but you can see the numbers are the main source of value of this person's the most successful person at my school, right? On TikTok, make me more famous, or fuck this person, or it's really vicious at times.
Yeah. But then again, even hearing us now, I wonder if we took a step back from ourselves and we said, oh, are we just,
younger me would fucking
right,
love it.
Are we,
younger me would fucking love it.
Are we like the old men on the porch with our rocking chairs saying
I
like,
am.
what?
You might not be. I
but
am.
you know, even at this point though, we are considered, I guess, more well-versed than the average 30-something-year-old in social media.
For this specific thing, yeah.
What if, to give, I guess, like Gen Zers more credit, what if this is like just a language that is now forever part of humanity, which is the commerce of social media? And maybe we as the first like harbingers of it, like had to deal a lot with the recourse of this valuation that's very abstract, but maybe their fluency in it is going to grow into something that is a little more maybe they'll have their own way of dealing with that by perfecting the language in certain aspects where it's not as like deeply ingrained with this idea of success or self-worth.
Sure.
Because I'm sure in the future social media will still be there. Maybe it's going to become, I hope in the next few generations it's going to become a war against AI or robots, because I'm so sad I'm missing that, because
that's what you're like.
Yeah, you know, and I know the best robots will be like East Asian looking, and I can like maybe pass because I'm very bad at human emotions. But no, I think I'm always such my own devil's advocate, which I think is a good place to be in my head and think like, yeah, what maybe there are kids out there who are really just kind of, they're born into it. They're on their fucking iPhones at 3, and maybe their minds are just wired slightly differently. We're interesting because we're, I guess, like early cusp Gen Yers, like millennials, first millennials. So we grew up in the shift, so we had the dial up until now.
Sure.
So our whole mode is adaptability. This idea of like, how do I adapt? Like, this has to compute. I need to like change and shift, and everything is like, I think we feel the weight of needing to, I don't know, everything has to have the weight of revolution for us, because we constantly were evolving. And now that things I think have like more set rules with how the world is with this social currency online, I think Gen Z might have, I don't know, being born into something is so much easier.
That is interesting, that because they've been able to kind of witness what the downfalls, they get to see the successes and failures. Yeah, that is interesting. So maybe it is one of those things where we or me, I'm not giving enough credit. That said, I do still think that there's going to be some notable burnouts.
Yeah, I think for sure. But what the other interesting thing is, with them being so well versed in social media and being so wired in, they have such a even though it's through their phone, they have such a wider experience of different personalities and backgrounds. Even people watching now, or people who watch me across social media, they're like, there's a gay Asian man from Texas telling his story. They see me when they're kids. So their knowledge of everything is more, it's more well-rounded in terms of cultural exposure. So you're finding that instead of like how I think millennials, Gen Yers have to like, we feel like we did kind of really fight at everything. I notice even on TikTok, like they'll call each other out on things because they're aware that the hot white teenagers are still just hot white teenagers who are popular because they're hot white teenagers. You know, there's an awareness there that is just sort of like they accept it, they're lived in, but they're not like cool with it. You know,
that's interesting, because I get the idea of being so interconnected and seeing things that are different than if you kind of just like looked around your town. Yeah, right. That can kind of expand, but it does feel easier than ever, and I think that it's something that we're seeing of it's never been easier than ever to go in your own bubble.
Yeah.
Find your own bubble. I mean, like when we were kind of talking about everyone found themselves, right? It still happens. I think we're just, I don't know. For me, it kind of just boils down to what's the percentage? What's the percentage of younger people that are seeing the world now that are going to just go like, yes, I just want to find other people that are like me, or I want to experience something different.
And I think that comes down in the end to not a generational question, but just a individual, how shitty of a person are you? Right. And that's an age-old thing that every generation can relate to, right?
Okay.
You're just going to have shitty people that you know that want to congregate with other shitty people and share shitty backwards views. You know, I think that'll be what it is. But I think as we, like people our age, have like adapted this idea of like wokeness, you know, like, oh, and as I say, revolutionizing everything. We're just like, oh, now I'm woke, and now this person's awkwardly woke or trying to be woke. I assume and I hope that this younger generation who's growing up in this exposure and in this dialogue are awake or should be awake. And
I was like, just you saying the word. That's the thing, is just you saying the word, some people are gonna jump on and be like, or just be like, I fucking hate that. I mean, I even kind of talked about on the show, where it's like sometimes it does feel like the woke Olympics, right? Where there's like a competition, and then everyone's kind of taking shots at each other, and it's just because there is kind of that rage, rather than going like, well, this is the difference. But it's also not that person's job to feel like they have to educate people. I don't know. No. It's a landscape that it's why I always pass the question off to people, because I'm just sitting fucking confused in my room sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, again, we're leaps and bounds away from full equality for so many different marginalized groups.
Sure.
But I would assume that people who have access to the internet and who watch people like us in creative content online have the base exposure and knowledge to so many communities, that my hope is that at least in the middle schools and the high schools, that they would be able to recognize and call out injustice when they see it. And you see them organizing more than, I mean, even March for Our Lives is a great example. Like there's a certain, I think, collective identity that I think will eventually sort of hopefully propel the outliers that are trying to take everyone down more to the fringes.
Sure.
But you never know, because we're in a place now where I wasn't even expecting us to be this, you know, volatile with each other. So
I think there was an Obama clip that like went viral the other day where he talked about like, it's not the most beneficial thing in the world to just say like you're woke and just attack people online.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. Well, two things. One, I forgot how much I enjoy him speaking.
Oh, yeah.
It was just like, oh,
eloquence.
Everything's going to be okay. And then two, it was definitely interesting just to hear it, just because, I don't know, I feel like a lot of authoritative voices, it's those people are insane. Those people are insane.
Yeah.
Right. And so just to hear someone go like, people make mistakes. Some people say some stupid shit. Everyone's got like, most likely has love for their family, right? There's all these things that tie us together, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because I talk about the worst of the world, and I think that you guys get to entertain the world. Although I feel like you guys probably do more living. I am more in my
no.
My room.
I think it's all in the end. Again, I think more about what the conversation you start is, and being sensitive to that, and being aware that your contribution with your strengths is feeding something that's hopefully somewhat similar, which is just trying to make people feel closer to each other. Right.
Right.
And I think that, I don't know. I think the one thing that I talk quite objectively about a lot of these like social sort of circumstances that we found ourselves in. But one thing, especially for like young listeners and viewers, like very young ones who, I saw this happening even when I was at BuzzFeed, where you see this class of like, I didn't ask to be born into the majority. I'm not, why is everyone attacking me? Like all these arguments is, everyone has access to reading about history.
Sure.
Everyone should be able to see that it has only been within really the last decade that people are writing their own histories, whether it be women or people of color or queer communities, or, this is something where it's so new that it wasn't written or dictated from a white, male, straight, Catholic or Protestant perspective. You can name it. That this retaliation that people are feeling to go against it is we see this as like this huge like moment in time where everything is this upsurge of all of these minorities and everything. But there's been so many instances in the past where people have like still crushed those people. And because we are still considered in every sense of the word a minority. So what I urge for people is to understand that there is still power imbalance institutionally on everything, even when it comes to something as small as I say about like popular people on TikTok. That's a cultural imbalance.
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with defending yourself, but you also have to be aware in the fact that the fight you bring to something is going to be feeding either an institutionalized power structure that has always been there since Western civilization decided to explore other continents. And, the Roman Empire was like, oh, I'm going to go fuck everybody up. But, or you can still be yourself and live a very fulfilled, open life, but listen to this really new, exciting age we could be living in, where I feel like so much of my own potential anger and harsh statements online have been this feeling of there's no way to reach the other side. Therefore, I have to be. It's no longer my responsibility to handhold people.
Right.
I need to retaliate and lash as hard as they have done to me or my people since the dawn of millennia. So it's that feeling of I think about that divide in the discourse where I think some of us are a little too far gone, but I think kids these days have like such a strong opportunity to not treat one another in that sort of like high contrast way from the beginning. It doesn't mean that it solves bullying or people spotting their differences in the playground, but that immediate alignment with the dumb shit we adults say sometimes, whether you're like, oh, I'm far right or I'm far left or whatever. Like, I don't know. I just feel like every time a new generation comes up, they can be establishing their own rules. And interestingly enough, I think people our age, we just happen to be, again, in the midst of constant reinvention and revolution. I think we thrive on that. I think we like to feel like everything has such important weight. And I know I look forward to the hope that others will adapt a more nuanced way of sort of seeing and approaching each other.
It will be interesting to see kind of the evolution over the next 10 years, just because, I mean, even with you saying the past decade, I feel like that's pretty accurate just because as far as like the education in general. I mean, every now and then I take a peek at me from even as recent as like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago. And I'm just like, fuck, that's like a person I don't even want to associate with. And I think it's been part of, I've been in a lucky enough position where people are, if I've had a certain thought or belief, or even kind of like certain things that I would say, that people would have a conversation with me rather than lashing out at me. Yeah. Which is something I think that I'm not always open with other people in the sense of giving them that opportunity. And I've been trying to, because there was definitely a period of my life where I would lash out, not in the same not in the same way, because it's not like I've been ever fucking persecuted.
No, but I mean, I think that the recognition towards this feeling that you could grow, and I have a similar thing, like regardless of our background, I think that everyone having, I think the greatest detriment of anyone's perspective, specifically with this current generation and how we treat each other online, is the core ideology that they can never be corrected or wrong, And ironically, I have a stupid show we have on TryGuys where my catchphrase is "I'm right, you're wrong, shut up," which is literally it's like a parody of this idea of what I think is the general feeling that most people have, which is you are completely wrong if you are going to come up against me. And I think that it's opened up all this like really interesting discourse, but in the end, I don't think that anyone in any sort of field that was looking to discover something new were completely closed off to outside input or to compromise or to even negotiating things in a way that you could continue like discourse that can create new ideas and new, I don't know, relationships that challenge what we think is supposed to be set in stone. Because I think that the worst idea that we associate with even like the idea of conservatism as we know it is this stagnant feeling of not being able to grow. And I think
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely changed.
yeah. No, I mean, that has changed a lot, but certainly anything that we think philosophically associated with that idea of like, oh, they're immovable, the older generation or whatever. If you reflect that on yourself, then I think that you're just giving yourself a disservice of going against everything you would believe, which is this lack of evolution.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. There's always a line you can draw. I think everyone will see it. You can smell it when you really speak with someone, or even if someone comments some bullshit on your thing, you'll just know, okay, I don't want to associate with this person necessarily.
Sure.
But the way that will carry over, and I think I've seen it carry over into just like polite conversation, is I think what eventually is going to hurt a lot of people from potentially being able to access that growth.
Yeah. I don't know. And it may be the cynicism. I feel like it's more than ever, at least in my world, people are just not open. Like I remember in the past, I would get negative comments and I'd kind of like agree with them to the point where it was kind of like funny. And half the time, like they'd join in and like, oh, you know what? I was just having a bad day. Some shit like that. Now, if I try that, they just double down.
Yeah.
They're like, no, but seriously, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
I hate you forever. Die in a fire. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you for watching.
Yeah.
To kind of bring it back now that we've solved racism and injustice, we did it together.
Yes.
To kind of go back to, and I think I'm just interested because I've experienced it to a different degree. I'm not going to ask you the worst thing about BuzzFeed or anything like that. What was the best thing about BuzzFeed, and what's been the worst thing about being independent?
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of flip. I think the best thing about working for a place like BuzzFeed was, in the end, although I was very against it while I was there, the feeling of really keeping an eye on how you portrayed and supported marginalized voices, you can never take that away from a place like BuzzFeed. It always was, regardless of even if there were controversies, because business, it happens inside. Their goal was always, to the end, inclusivity and being very much part of the ways in which people could enrich their viral experience by seeing other people from different communities. And I think that was pretty much, I think, even though I didn't like the like positive aspect of having to be like, well, everything's like hunky dory.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask why you didn't have like,
I didn't like the tone of it all the time.
Sure.
But I liked the meat of it, the meat of the argument that we are going to seek voices that haven't been heard.
Sure.
And I think that is why I inevitably had stayed there for a while, which was I felt supported in, at the very least, being as gay and Asian as I felt creatively in that space. Did I want to be positive about it all the time? Hell no. No, I wanted to fucking scream from the rooftops and do some really weird ass shit. But I think that was the best thing about working there. And I think the hardest thing about being independent with the TryGuys, with our own production company, is, I guess I get really nitty gritty with business stuff, but I think that
I'm here to hear it.
Yeah. We're in this age, and we kind of discuss this with where YouTube's at right now, where digital, especially with the viewing audience, is comparable, if not sometimes superior to traditional.
Sure. Yeah.
What people ingest is so, YouTube and even podcasts, they're now part of like people's daily viewing habits, more so than even going to the movies. And so but the businesses itself, we have to give digital platforms a little credit where they're still like in a certain like pubescent stage. They're still figuring out a lot of stuff.
Sure.
Because they're also trying to make everyone happy, while you have Hollywood, which is kind of now following the cue of what's happening online, because they see it being very popular and they're trying to like figure out the secret formula, because everything's very formulaic when it comes to things like that, but it's so structured, which is great, which is why you have a lot of problems and injustices.
Like you guys are in this like sweet spot though.
Yeah, we're kind of in a nice middle spot.
You're like mainstream YouTube. You know what I mean?
We've been able to hit the mainstream, which is I never dreamed of as a person, but I think that it's
you guys have probably been part of like Brandcast almost every year, probably.
First year this year, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we were always so like, that's part of the company thing. I think they also like didn't ever really invite us because they weren't sure exactly how we would play. Because also like, I think, you know, BuzzFeed when we were there had its own like massive sales generation arm. So it wasn't like they needed YouTube. But yeah, that was our first Brandcast. It was like with the whole YouTuber summer. That was very interesting. I liked the YouTuber aspect, namely because I got to meet a lot of people who I never met before. And a lot of them met me and they're like, oh, Eugene's like chill. He wants to take everyone to the
That was
gay
going to be
bars.
one of the things that I asked you about earlier was I was like, you talked about not really being accepted by the community. I was like, now that you guys are solo, right? You don't have the big B kind of attached to you.
Yeah.
Are people like, hey, it's nice to actually meet you?
I literally feel like the crazy gay uncle at those things because I'm like slightly older, but I'm also like weirdly probably the most active in regards to like going out.
Sure.
Because certainly I never dealt with like being a teenager and being hounded by strangers. But, you know, as an adult who's still confused about why people approach him or like him, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to the drag show and guys should come with me. So every YouTuber experience I've had, I've been dragging like whoever wants to go to drag shows with me.
Oh, okay.
So that's been really good. But yeah, no, I think that going back to the worst thing about the company, no, you're fine. No, I'll talk about drag shows until the cows come home. Which is a very Texan phrase, is
the two things that go together.
Yeah. So the YouTube being a competitor to traditional means that there's a harder in for what you do online to translate to what happens in traditional spaces. And traditional spaces still have, I would say, the most money and the most power in regards to flexing creative projects. So say selling something like the Phil DeFranco show or something to say a Netflix or something like that, they would want to see at this point, it's less about adapting you to traditional because you're a competitor now. It's like, what can you give me that's so different, but will also appeal to a different audience, but will also bring in your audience. So it's become this very interesting.
Is that based off of like conversations where you were trying to think of like, how can we do this project? Because I've heard that from several people that I thought would fucking kill it on Netflix and they're not getting those deals.
Because the insider information is that, you know, they've had experiences in a lot of streaming platforms and traditional trying to adapt, say, digital talent over. And although me and the TryGuys consider ourselves more producers first when it comes to unscripted, you have a lot of people who are considered more like just traditional acting or on-screen talent. So you either have situations where someone crosses over, quote unquote, but then completely, in a way, abandons digital.
Sure.
Or you have people that they try to adapt. And when they adapt, they maybe bring over their audience, but they don't resonate with a larger audience outside of who already follows them.
Sure.
And so they don't see the value proposition of bringing someone over when they already have a high value that's insular to their digital workspace.
Yeah.
So that is kind of and this is kind of advice to anyone who is a creator or known for digital stuff. What is the new unique value proposition when it comes to traditional? And I think that what I do think is positive is that it's going to be the people like us or people from the digital space who are probably going to be the most influential connectors of traditional and digital rather than the other way around. Because understanding production models and timelines and budgets is a headache, but you can get it. But I think understanding the sort of secret sauce of how you can pop out a video in an hour and reach millions of people and speak to them in a way that feels honest is not something that you just pick up. And it's not something that you can write on a chalkboard in the boardroom of like a big movie studio.
Sure.
Which is really antiquating the idea.
I was like, I agree and I disagree.
They don't have chalkboards anymore.
I was like, I agree and disagree just because we've seen kind of the rise of Will Smith on social media. We've seen the rise of who's super jacked in the Baywatch movie that's not The Rock?
Zac Efron?
Yeah. Oh my God. This is my whole life. I'm like, that guy that exists.
Yeah.
Like him on YouTube. And it's just seeing these kind of mainstream people be able to do something that is kind of quick or lower quality, but to massive success. I feel like you're not going to see the death of like the organic YouTuber, it's I feel like it's harder than ever. But
where I would sort of shade that argument is who is creating their videos though? So Will Smith isn't filming himself. Will Smith has a team that's digitally knowledgeable that is a branch of his production company that does his videos, which is, you know, great because he's a mega movie star. You know,
Yeah.
that's where it comes. So it's more the question of when traditional is now trying to seek the uniqueness of people from who have risen from the digital space. And it's been happening under our noses for the past like 5-ish years without us really knowing it. Like those pop off television series, especially on streaming, that have unique perspectives from people that you would like not necessarily associate with that, from say a boardroom meeting where they're like, oh, we're going to pick up this show from Donald Glover, or from, you know, people who have Bo Burnham, like these people who have like experience in that space. That's what they're trying to bring over. And in the end, it's going to be those people dictating, I think, the quality in which that content or that show or that movie is going to actually reach, you know, a wider audience. And I think that always will come from the person whose hands are in pots. And yeah, you can plug and play, I think, big traditional talent into YouTube. And now it's becoming, you know, you're across everything. You're going to be on a Facebook show, and then you'll also maybe be in a movie. But
yeah, with having to be everywhere, I've been kind of shocked by the number of people that we've had on where they're like, yeah, no, it's me. I'm like, stop, stop. Like, well, because you guys most likely you pay editors, right? I imagine.
yes,
Yeah, it was
and
like-
that's a timeline thing too.
Yeah,
like
well,
we
that's the
used
thing,
to
is
love
that-
that,
well,
but
that's, because
Yeah.
there's definitely, it's like you get to flex this different muscle, but
totally,
you get the output, right?
the output
is
is
so limited.
It's tough. Yeah.
What's it? Something I've been wondering. It's something that every person that I've ever worked with, I've always recommended against it. But what is it like working with it sounds like they're your main friends now, like these other three guys.
Yeah.
What is it like going like, okay, not only do we work together and it's like creative choices, but this is our livelihood. Has that changed now that you've gone independent, for the better, at times worse?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely better in terms of business autonomy, for sure. Like that's just an obvious. I think for worse, we're at a stage in our career where we certainly see the value of what we do as a group, and we have established a very strong brand, and we truly are best friends, which I think is what in the end really matters for the digital space, is that they see that, they know it.
It's always hard because it's like you see it and then everyone has this general understanding, but there's a lot of the time it's completely different.
And you'll see crews online that like pair up and collab and they're like friends, but they really fucking hate each other. You know, it's the, you know, again, I'm talking about the old Hollywood model. It's just like let's cast Marilyn with James and say, you know,
1000%.
But they'll hate each other on the set, but they'll make so much money. Or marriages, or like whatever people are doing, or fights.
But it's also sometimes like there's, you know, at some point we're all growing, we all become different people, where you're just like, is even to the point of when you were like, you know, there's certain people that it doesn't benefit you to have you in their life.
Yeah.
Right. But then it's like, you have this established thing, it's making money, it's helping you with the fame, but it's good to hear that it's like, it's worked out thus far for you guys.
Yeah. And I think we see it as, like we're so interested in the end in how, and a lot of the conversation hopefully reflected that, is what does digital content do? How does it contribute to society? What is even the data and the science behind it? Why are these things working and why they're not? We're fascinated by that. And I think that the core ideology of what we're doing as a production company, and if it eventually expands to projects outside of digital, will always be there. I think when it comes to even just our individual pursuits and what we do creatively, we're eventually going to be branching off. It's going to happen. We certainly are not in any ways reliant on one another. But I think we also understand that some things are just always going to be great to produce with the spirit of honoring digital content. And we know that in that space, the four of us can like rock it with our socks off. I was going to say cocks out, but I'm going to, because that people would believe that to be true, because we have been naked around each other a lot. But you know, with our socks off, we can just like pump out really interesting stuff and have great ideas until again, the cows come home. But
earlier you were talking about passion projects. Do you have kind of the next one in your head?
Yeah, no, I'm working on quite a few things that might be more or less going more into the traditional space. And I've certainly, you know, I've learned a lot with this coming out video this year, which originally I was not even considering putting online, that the privilege of even being a top tier YouTuber is so rare. And for me to withhold things because of this idea of platform, you know, like for some reason, me having this old guard idea as a film school kid of I'm going to hold my full artistic self away from this platform because this is where I'm, I don't know, goofy or currently just making my money, was a fallacy. It was a logical fallacy that I see now the error of my ways, because every part of you that you bring that's new and interesting is what makes things like digital videos great. And that was a very particular, unique thing that I put out there. But I also see it as, you know, cool because I was able to show people what I do as a director, as a choreographer, as a writer. And a lot of that I hope will be echoed in future projects that might find different homes. And some things aren't necessarily right for, say, like a constant YouTube grind. And some things are. And I think that the big thing is kind of just being flexible about where that goes. Because again,
and it sounds like you guys aren't in the mind space or the headspace of like you would ditch the platform to some degree, which I think fewer and fewer people have done now that they're taking other projects, just because we've seen people in the past do that. And I was like, and you're gone. Yeah.
We're I think just late enough in the game of digital where we get why maintaining a digital presence is important, because again, as we talked about, like movie stars coming in, everyone's creating a digital presence anyway. So dropping it for some idea that you're going to be like migrated to somewhere else is kind of inane in today's market, because everyone's trying to have an imprint in everything. But certainly for me, I think that I am still very old school when it comes to things like filmmaking, and I like crews. I like working with very talented people from different departments. I like to collaborate with people.
I'm clenching inside. I'm like,
no, I love it. I love it. I wish I could just, you know, have a huge like group of artists who I can just like argue with and work with and collaborate with, and just, you know, that's my dream sort of environment, just as a storyteller, more for me in the scripted realm. But I think that that'll be something that will be very good for me as a creative over the next few years. But when it comes to digital, I think that for me, there's nothing more fulfilling than being able to showcase who I am and what I can do within the sort of context of the TryGuys, where at the very end of the day, even though I am, as I mentioned before, the only person of color and the only queer person, people see us as best friends, and we are best friends. And isn't that like kind of the best message then that people could take away, is that Eugene is truly just a dark, nihilistic, weird guy who's gay and Asian and angry, and yet he is like BFFs with these three goofy, fun, very cool straight white guys who in their own ways are unique in themselves.
Right.
So I think that there's power to, and I think that using the term mainstream is like hard. It's I
was just going to say, I think you guys have done a really great job. I mean, among several things, of each of you stands out. Like, I know that to bring it back to a thing that we talked about earlier about representation, where I know that in other things you've talked about, like in the past, Asian men have been kind of relegated to the background, right? That's not the case with you guys. You've done a very effective job, and I wonder if it's just natural, or is there something in the creation of the content that you focus on to make that the case? Or
I think we this was kind of a good example of, even when we first started as a cast, we were very sensitive to audience comments. So we could see that people were attracted to certain things. The best example, and Ned can talk about this at length, is that Ned was kind of at first the other white guy, because you had Keith, who has a very distinct comedic personality, he's huge. He's a tall guy with a big mouth. Man. And then you have Zach, who's a tiny little, well, he's not actually that tiny. People think he is, but he has very small, like delicate bird-like bone structure. So he's a baby-sized head. So he's a little guy with glasses. And then you had Ned, who's this like very generic-looking white dude. And so he was always kind of the other white guy. And then when he mentioned in multiple videos that he was married, it became this huge character trait that the audience glommed onto, one that I was...
Dude, I'm guilty of that. I was like, oh yeah, the one with the baby.
I was totally just like, I was shocked when it first happened. I was like, are kids interested in married people? Is this... It became like kind of an aspirational thing, because he has a beautiful marriage with his wife and a really cute baby that they forced me to be around. But the audience helped dictate what they wanted to see in regards to how we were. And it was kind of cool because we were becoming friends as the audience was becoming friends with us. So we had a very rare situation where our group dynamics, as they saw us as characters, were also us figuring each other out as people. And now, you know, we've been able to like relax out of those roles and just be ourselves completely. So I'm like fucking goofy and fun in a video, and then I'm also serious and angry in another one. Constant exposure and output helps with that. I always said the weight of Asian America with Crazy Rich Asians, because you get one movie to do that. Will people like it? You get one chance. And with me, the weight of my representation as an Asian American was through hundreds and hundreds of videos. So people got the 360-degree view of who I was. And so that's the privilege of being online, is that people got to know me in a way that was way less precious than, say, what I'm going to do with a TV show. So where we're at now, which is great, is that, and I don't believe in colorblindness, I don't believe any of that stuff, but what's kind of beautiful about what TryGuys did is that our characters have become so distinct in regards to our personalities, that you have, you know, kids who dress up like us for Halloween, but it doesn't matter what race they are or what sexuality they are. They just dress as who they are in regards to who they identify most as. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like the 90s where if we were the Spice Girls, I would probably have to be scary, you know? And every person of color knows this. If you're anyone in a group setting, you're like, okay, and you'll be the Yellow Ranger. And I'm like, okay, I'll be the Yellow Ranger. Now it's just sort of like this, you know, I think it's more just who do you, if you have the beauty of being able to like really know people, which we have in the digital space, then I've seen a lot of them where the Asian friend is Keith, and it's great. But yeah, I think that.
Do you feel like it's going the route of? So are you saying that you think that it's going the route of like it's less important, or?
No, I'm hoping that whoever is me in Halloween still yells about race and queerness and gets mad at the others about being like ignorant to things. I think that's important. But I think that just in our case, where me is the othered person, where typically in media I would either be like the sassy best friend or the emasculated like nerd, you know, whatever I would have played into typically because of how I look or my background. We erased that immediately. It was just very clear that we were just going to be ourselves. And when we first started together, I happened to also be the one who wanted everything. And I happened to be also weirdly the most traditionally masculine, which is very funny because I'm the gay Asian guy.
Sure.
Because I have a lot of pent up rage issues, and I have dad issues, and I have lots of, you know, problems when it comes to if you put a liquor bottle in front of me. I've been staring at these Jameson bottles all the time.
That's the thing is I was like, I know that you said that you like bourbon, and I was like, I
love bourbon.
I'm just on medication, so otherwise I would have been like, yes, let's drink some bourbon.
Are you a big bourbon guy?
Yes, I'm actually I'm working with a distiller right now. We're testing flavors.
Oh,
I'm like very excited.
A DeFranco brand bourbon.
It won't have my name on it.
Okay.
But it's, I'm very excited.
It's like the Ryan Reynolds Aviation Gin. Yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing is it would be weird if it was called like Ryan's Gin.
That's true. Do you have a type of bourbon in terms of the flavor profile?
So that's the thing. So I'm going to San Diego in the next 2 weeks, and we're just going to keep rolling through. I have kind of like this general idea. I've been learning way too much about just the industry in general and what's legal and not legal as far as how to get it into people's hands.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's because I don't know. Especially like I grew up with Bacardi 151 is like the first thing I ever drank, which is it's just sloppy and bad, and then like I kind of grew up, and Jameson has been like my favorite sort of drink, and then I've just been drinking just a bunch of different bourbons, and I don't have a favorite, and I'm just trying to find something that I would want to sip. Right?
Do you like the smooth and clean like finish, or do you want something with the more
I bounce back and forth,
smoke or grit, or
I think the reason that Jameson was kind of my go-to was I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to at the time wince.
Yes.
And I'm like, but sometimes there's something nice about it, whether it slows down my pace or I'm just looking for like a distinct flavor.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm weird because it's similar to like intellectually. I like to be challenged physically, especially my palate. So my favorite like sipping whiskeys are like things that takes like a smoker's lung, even though I don't like smoking.
Yeah.
But I like the appeal of alcohol that feels like it's sat in a like a hardcore lifelong smoker's lung.
Sure.
And it's just like hits you like you're sitting in a Parisian cafe in the 1960s.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I like things that like force me to step back and go, huh? You know?
I was like, for me, that was IPAs because the old SourceFed crew would drink them. And I was like, I will drink this because it'll literally take me an hour to drink my first one.
It was, okay, so what's interesting with IPAs is that was unfortunately looped into that whole like, the whole craze and trend of people liking IPAs with the whole like individual breweries popping up, and everyone had to have their big IPA that they shoved a lot of herbal like spice and craziness into. So people kind of started dismissing it as like, oh, you like IPAs because it's on trend. But I sincerely want my beer to taste like it has been like dragged through Martha Stewart's garden. You know, like I want it to taste like every herb.
It's so interesting.
Fucked inside.
I don't
I
don't understand like even my own appeal for it. But yeah, when you were saying that all of a sudden people were like, oh, IPAs, then it felt like there was like the emergence or new focus on, was it sours?
Yes.
And
but I'm not a big sours fan.
I don't think I've ever had one.
I think it's because sours often are paired with a fruity note.
Okay.
And I hate fruity tasting beer. I even don't like, my wines have to be so dry that you could I don't know, put a camel across it.
Sure.
I want it to be like a desert. Any sweet wine I will throw across the room.
Wait, so what is your relationship with alcohol now? Because it sounds like
healthy. It's healthy. I certainly purport more of a like, oh, Eugene like loves to drink. What I always have to clarify to the audience is my stepfather is French Korean. So I grew up part of my like childhood in France as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then in my family, there has been alcohol dependency issues. So I've always been around it in different ways, but certainly I appreciate it culturally. I also appreciate it for a good party. And I have a really weird high tolerance. So yeah, that's where the whole partying mystique comes from. But certainly I'm very responsible when it comes to drinking it.
Sure.
But
do you feel like you've always been that way, or is it's been like a learned behavior?
No, I hated it as a kid.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't touch it until I was in college, namely because of the said family problems. But once I had it, I was just like, oh, I get why people in my family buried their issues with this. It was great. Yeah. But now I appreciate it when it comes to taste, because I actually like the taste of alcohol. What I found is, so I'm not a big rum drinker because rum mixed drinks are so buried in sugar and juice that you can't taste the alcohol. And that's what it's a very stereotypical term, but what they called like the college girl drink, where they're like, get the Malibu and the orange juice, and that's what you put in the party. I don't want to taste like I'm just drinking like juice as a toddler.
Do you have like a one alcohol, just like hearing the name makes you sick? Because when you said rum, for some reason Parrot Bay popped in my head, and I was But do you have like one that you have this just name connection to that?
Mine are definitely opposite from most people, because I could say the average drinker would say they make a face when you say Jägermeister. They make a face when you say
mistakes.
A lot of people don't like Fireball whiskey, which is a little too sweet for me, but I like it
for every now and then.
I mean, it's a great party thing, you know? But for me, you know, what's the most offended I get, I think, God, with, you know, I think that dessert wine's one.
Okay.
Really turned me off. And then as far as liquor brands, God, I really don't discriminate much with liquors.
I'm just a big fan.
Yeah, I just don't like things that, like, if you have vodka and then it's flavored with like bubble gum or something like that. Yeah, I don't fuck with that.
Okay.
I want to taste
heavy flavors.
The heavy flavor of the alcohol, and appreciate that it was like barrel aged or whatever the process was. So that's why I tend to lean towards bourbons and whiskeys, just because you can drink them neat, which I appreciate, or like a good old dirty gin martini or something like that. I've gotten into gin recently because I like tasting the juniper and those notes, which I think a lot of people are very averse to gin.
I don't seek it out. I don't know if I have any feelings.
I find whiskey bourbon drinkers tend to appreciate parts of it. Yeah, because gin is also something I think you really want to like taste the actual gin. I don't know if this has become a drinkers podcast suddenly.
I mean,
how
it
often
could
do you
be.
talk about alcohol?
I used to. So I want to say it was like 4 years ago. My idea of a podcast was like 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And we'd always open it with, hey, let's get a drink. And we stopped doing that because it had to be, and I feel so bad about this, I shot like a 2.5 to 3 hour podcast with Anna Akana. And I think I legitimately just got so drunk that I didn't know what was happening in the conversation. Never went up.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
and Anna was drinking too?
I believe so.
Yeah. No, Anna's cool. So I can imagine that would have been a fun conversation.
No, and I think there was definitely 30 solid minutes in there. And then I was just talking in circles. So now I don't for the most part, but I think that's the thing. it's I think I was also shooting 2 podcasts back to back, so she got the
Yeah.
worst version of me because I was just already in. I was like, yeah, we're having a great time.
Yeah, kind of like, it's interesting with the TryGuys for this output. We created these sort of like quick series that we could shoot that, interestingly enough, because it was just us shooting from the hip, became like mainstay shows on our channel. So it's like Keith's Eat the Menu, where he eats all of the fast food at once. Those are easier to shoot because you order, you sit. I do something called Rank King, which was just like,
I think you did a cereal one recently.
yeah, I did a cereal one with a child, which was fun. Very cool child. But one of them was these. I often do alcohol. One was this international cocktail taste test. It was interesting because the people I was with were totally pushing all the things I like towards the bottom, and I pushed mine towards the top. So my number one was USA's Manhattan.
Okay.
Because I just liked whiskey. And they put it so low. And number 2 for me was Italy's Negroni, which has Campari in it.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't like Campari because it's a very like strong, bitter flavor.
Sure.
But I think, you know what it is? I think I like alcohol that tastes like my soul.
Which is?
Bitter,
Okay.
dark, smoky, just
like it.
hazy. Like you can't really quite see through what's going on.
Yeah. I know that I was talking about bourbon. I think other than bourbon, tequila is probably my favorite now, but I had a weird relationship with it because about 10 years ago, when I was coming up, Axe Body Spray they were just going into to body washes. And so for some reason, they decided they were going to get a bunch of bloggers and me for some reason, and they're going to take us to the Kentucky Derby. And
Oh, you went to the Kentucky Derby?
It was the only time I ever went. It was very interesting.
I'm so interested in the Kentucky Derby.
Well, it's like 2 different worlds because you have like hoity-toity, I'm drinking like this very
the fancy 1%ers.
And then you go into the field and there's like people breaking glass bottles and cut up because they stepped on the glass bottle. It's like insane.
Yeah.
Fights breaking out.
Were you in the field or were you in
I went to both.
Oh, okay. That's
because
cool.
I was just like, I want to experience what this is. But so we went there and so they would always do something related to one of the scents. Like, so they were like, here's this experience. And there's like kind of like a refined thing. And it was related to one of the body washes and we had a tequila tasting. And I didn't know that in a tequila tasting, you're supposed to spit it out. And so I essentially just drank like 10 shots of tequila before we went out. And by the end of the night, I was just throwing up everywhere. It was a horrible time. And then these motherfuckers, they knew what they were doing because they also got us drunk at this like club where it was like 8 nerdy dudes in the VIP section. And they gave us, I think it's called fucking snakeskin body wash in the morning to wash last night off. And I was like, you motherfuckers got me shit-faced so you could be like, and that's how this relates to this body wash. Other than that, it was a great weekend.
That sounds like a party.
It was, I mean, but I couldn't touch tequila probably for 3-4 years.
Yeah, I think a word of advice I will never change is you should never use any sort of perfume, body wash, shampoo that smells more than the like the natural scent should. You know what I mean? Like it's just like the rule for candles.
Sure.
You don't want to send a candle to smell like an actual pumpkin spice latte. You want it to smell like you. There's like there's one in like 2 rooms over.
Sure.
Otherwise, you just are oppressively scented.
God, I didn't know how much goes into candles. We released some for we have a hair care line and
Oh, you have a hair care line too?
yeah.
What?
I needed something because I have like the straightest hair in the world and it took me like 9 years to find something that would work.
You should go in asking for someone who knows Asian hair. That's what you should do. So I have some advice for you actually.
Okay.
Scissor cuts only.
Yes.
Never use, and this is for anyone listening who has this quality hair. Don't use the number 2.
Well, because otherwise you just
buzzer.
fucking see the scalp.
Yeah, you'll see the scalp, which is a look. I mean, if you want to go down to that, it's good.
That's not my look. Yeah.
But if it once it starts growing out, there's that middle awkward time where for Asian guys especially, the hair sticks straight out. There's no way to comb it down. If you have thinner hair or wavier hair, there's ways to style it to push it down. But you have to wait for it to get to a certain length so it can lay flat. So if you ask your stylist who's good to just get a scissor cut and have them to cut it just before it would actually stick straight, then you'll always have a nice haircut.
Okay.
Yeah. But you have Asian hair.
Yeah.
Maybe there's like a Asian person way up in the genealogy.
Just 3%.
Have
and
you
it was
done
all
the
from my head.
genetics test?
Yeah, but it's like it's mainly Italian, Sicilian, and then it's like a bunch of Euro. Yeah. But I think there's like 2 or 3%. But I would never at that percentage, I'm not claiming anything.
Are you like half Italian?
Yeah.
So that means that's the predominant culture in the household, right? the Italian side?
I don't know. It was a little bit of everything because, I mean, as far as my dad, yeah. But it's one of those things where, like, my mom's, I think, German Italian. She doesn't feel Italian at all.
Yeah.
But then in my dad's house, and then with my stepmom, definitely, it was like, it's not pasta, or it's not regular spaghetti. It's like, you have sauce, you have, God, there's so many conversations that I didn't understand what the fuck was happening because everyone's speaking Italian.
Yeah.
And no one was like, maybe we should teach Philly. Maybe he should know how to speak Italian.
Yeah, because I think there's certain, we don't give enough credit to certain like European cultures that I think more aggressively passed down based on like national pride and just like richness of cuisine and culture. And Italian and like Greek, weirdly Irish too. They're like very much, that's when I meet like white people who have a quarter Italian. They're always so Italian. You know, they're always like, oh, you go home and my mom's like Italian, like this or that.
Oh, man, I got nothing. I got nothing.
That's like a big thing.
I was like shipped between, like my parents got divorced. So I was shipped between houses. And so it's like you're bouncing between New York and then North Carolina and then North Carolina and Florida. So it was like, I've got really no roots, whether it be to like, I don't know, like, I used to claim New York, but I don't. I've lived now in California the longest, but I still don't think of myself as a Californian. I don't know. It's I feel like I don't have roots. I'm just like, I just think of myself as a generic white guy.
I think as long as there's like one Italian grandma up in the family, then that like spirit like is steadfast. It lives on. There's like Ned is less than a quarter Italian, and every time you talk to him, he's just like, oh, I'm Italian. And I'm like, no, you're not. But then I thought about it. I was like, oh, but culturally, that just like it goes. It's like all Chicago and like Irish culture, you know. People might have like a quarter Irish, and that Irish.
I think maybe part of the in America, part of it that with younger generations that are less connected to it might be that like there was a time in America where Irish and Italians were actually like persecuted against, whereas. No one's ever fucking called me WAP. Yeah. no one's ever gone at me.
I was about to bring that up is that, I mean, the resilience in which cultures have had to survive because of persecution has also contributed, I think, to the richness in which family members have to pass it down. And I think you hit the nail on the head, like Irish and Italian especially. They were seen as like the brown folk back in the day with Ellis Island. And what else would you do besides surviving than to know that you need to like make sure that your kids and your grandkids have that? And also like Italians have such good fucking food that why would you ever want to ever have anything else besides Italian food?
One thing I wanted to touch on before we kind of close it out, because you mentioned daddy issues. And then I remembered that you said that, and maybe I'm getting it wrong, that your coming out or your relationship with your father allowed him to be less masculine. Is that accurate?
No,
there was something about you that helped change your father, and but you didn't elaborate on it when I was.
No, I think it's multiple. It's kind of multifaceted. Okay. So I have my father and my stepfather, and my mom. Okay, and I think that I think anything that really shakes a family structure, whether it be someone coming out or in my case a divorce in the family, really challenges the accepted norms you have of your sort of nuclear familial structure. And a lot of times that plays into what people might consider very traditional gender roles, like your father's the dad and your mom is the homemaker or something like that. And really with my coming out, particularly on some of my family's side, they were able to, I think, see how much my identity is connected to my art and my work, which certainly with some conservative communities, like that helps them kind of get it, as opposed to me just saying it as a kid. They see that if I can express it through something like my video, that it's very near and dear to what I want to say as a filmmaker, as a video producer. But also I think that, I grew up in such a limited structure in regards to everyone's feeling like they have to assimilate to a certain role because of their gender or their background. And for me, my sexuality was hidden. Coming out was, I think, very freeing for everyone, whether it be people that I no longer will talk to because we know where they stand, or it will be people that are still close to me, like my parents, who get that. Part of the reason, I think, to best put it, is my mom sometimes sends me texts now where she's apologizing because she doesn't feel like she gets it now, but she feels worse that she never spotted it when I was a kid. She sees me talk about being depressed or being bullied, and she knew I was weird. She knew I was artistic and like strangely quiet a lot.
Sure.
But she didn't ever think that I was going through that much pain. And for her, the idea that she was somehow trapped in her own position to not be able to see my issues or pain, that hurts her now, which I think is really tragic, because I tell her, no, you couldn't have done anything because you were also put into this like exalted housewife position where you were like, this is your role, this is what you do.
Sure.
But I think that it's that type of conversation that's really wonderful, where she's come to a point, and all my parents have come to a point to see like, oh, okay, I can identify how not only it was your struggle and you coming out in this moment, but how that relates to how I was treating you when I was then and where I'm at now.
Sure.
So my dad can see, or my parents, my stepfather can also see that, yeah, treating me like I was the boy and the like sporty, emotionless boy certainly didn't help my growth to come to terms with my sexuality. But I think that I always say, especially with queer people in the queer community, that your solo journey is tied to so many other people's journeys with you. Your coming out processes, especially with close family, is like a weird coming out for them as well. And so once you can determine if they are worthy or interested or really like capable of evolving with you, then you have to be sensitive to what their journey looks like.
Sure.
Mine happened to take over 20 years, but finally we're at a point where they get it. But yeah, I think that,
I mean, it's interesting. That's kind of like lovely, but also sad because it involves regret.
Which I think really, when it comes to LGBTQ stuff, it's always going to be regret driven and sadness oriented. I think there's no way to get around this idea of someone hiding themselves for so long without people feeling the immediate emotion of what that kid or person was going through, which was not being themselves. And I think when people come to terms with this idea that they might have also have potentially actively contributed to the person being closeted or not understanding or not liking themselves, it's certainly very hard, and probably even harder for parents and siblings who love their kid, because I think in the end, I determined my parents love me.
Yeah.
And they understand now that things that they might have said or did were harmful, and but they get it now, which is great. And that's kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel. I try to tell, especially a lot of kids who are queer and of color or from religious backgrounds, that some things take time, unfortunately. And, having the realization that you might have in your own structured view as a father or mother might have also hurt your kid.
Yeah.
And you have to get over not only that, but your own self-perception of what it means to be a dad or a mom. Or
so around that, because I always ask like for a piece of advice in general for creators, but I think I want to ask you on that note, and I'm thinking about it too, as now a parent of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Oh my God, your dad.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry.
Well, wait.
I usually can.
I thought you were sorry. I'm sorry that you decided to have children.
No, you seem so cool though.
maybe it's because I just got a vasectomy, so I'm reverting back to my old self.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
when I said I was on medication right now, that's literally why.
From the vasectomy.
Yeah.
So you just 2 kids. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, done. Yeah. No, done. But on the note, right? Because I think it's not. It's potentially advice that's not just for a parent of an LGBT kid, right? But just in general, having lived your experience, what advice would you give to a parent out there for any kid, based off of your own upbringing?
Oh, that's tough because it's interesting. I'm not a parent, but I'm.
Well, what would you have wished your parents did? I feel like maybe that's where it can come from.
I think, and hopefully this is universal. I speak so specifically about my experience, and I think that's usually hopefully where the best stories come from, is people go, oh, I see myself in that somehow. I've often wished divorce upon my Asian friends' parents. Is that a weird thing to say?
No, I think that makes sense. Some people just shouldn't fucking be together.
Some people shouldn't be married. Yeah. And certainly in a lot of Asian cultures, like arranged marriages are still a thing. And I saw the lack of love with my parents since I was a kid before they divorced. And I smelled it immediately growing up. And I could see that duty and position and station in life as a husband, a wife, a man, a woman, a woman, whatever it is, whatever your self-perceived station is as a parent, is one of those things that is like, I think it's a sinister, secretly ingrained thing that we don't think about often. I mean, think about all the daddy and mommy issues everyone has.
Yeah.
Really deep in their soul, and how that will always translate to probably how you are as a parent. You know, I'm already dreading how I'm going to be as a parent because I know I'll be aware of it and try to help, you know, like reconcile a lot of issues I've had. But I think that the biggest thing is for parents, not to lose sight of themselves before their role as a mom or dad. And it's hard because I think that in the end, and now being so close to Ned and Ariel from the TryGuys, being young parents and really respecting how all consuming it is. And also like they would die for their kid. Like there's no question. I don't feel that. I mean, maybe for one of my dogs, I won't say which dog. I love my dogs, but you know, I'm not gonna, like the car's going to come. I'll be like, oh, it was so sad. Time to go to the pound. But you know, a baby, I'm going to fucking jump from the car.
Sure.
No, I would probably actually die for my dogs. But I
was like, I don't agree with that decision, but you do you, I guess.
Oh no. The core idea of maternal and paternal instinct is there. And then I think if that ends up overriding the self-care and autonomy of being an individual, already I see people losing that in marriages. Like, if you lose that, I don't think any like true form of happiness can come that has been solely derived from your perception of yourself based on a relationship. And I think that is something I was really witness to because of traditional Asian society, where filial piety is like the number one thing, and your relationship to your father, especially, and then your mother and your siblings. There's an order, there's a competitiveness, there's a duty, again, for lack of a better word, and how that destroys, I think, families from the inside out is that it immediately is an excuse to not grow or communicate issues with one another because you are conditioned and expected to suppress it for the sake of your relationship with your partner or your parent or your child. Sure. And I think when my parents, what I wish they did, and which they kind of did once they divorced, which was realize that the simmering issues or anger or self-doubt that they had, even just in their marriage, was going to inevitably be reflected in how they treated their kids, without knowing that sort of internal rot or decay, as I like to call it, spreads like a weed, and it will affect all of their most interpersonal relationships. But a lot of families, particularly ones I was witness to, who I've wished divorce upon, like just silently like, oh, I wish your parents could divorce and have their own lives.
Yeah.
It's there, and then it carries on because then you bury your parents, and then you yourself saw what they did, how they suffered together, and then you are expected to suffer with that. And I now am like more self-possessed to understand that I'm better than that type of suffering.
Well,
but I certainly have, I certainly have constantly subjected myself to long suffering relationships, and even with my own demons, because I expect myself to get through it because of what I should be, which is a man and a good son and whatever bullshit that is. And, you know, that's a universal thing. I think that people feel like they must present a certain way to check off a box based on where they are, who they are in their life, without actually looking inside and seeing what the actual source of their pain is from. And I don't want to say it's an excuse, but the excuse of being like a father or a mother or a husband is often a weird Band-Aid people say to excuse bad behavior or to excuse a strange view on something that could be dealt with in a very individual way, especially with like a queer kid, you know? So that's kind of where it kind of comes full circle.
Sure.
Being a good father to teach your son how to be a man, which is a constant thing that you see like people getting enraged about on Twitter. But the core idea of it is still like, you know, my dad's really masculine. I was raised very masculine, and I can see a lot of people out there. It doesn't matter if there's someone LGBT in your family or not, or if it's your daughter or your son. There's a weird thing about feeling like you have to raise someone a certain way because they happen to be a certain gender, or because they happen to like, I don't know, like a sport or like dresses. Like it's so much of like this outside conditioning and tradition that is like seeping into our brains that we're not in check of, because in the end you should value your relationship with your family and your kid before your relationship with what larger society has told you to believe.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. I think I like that. There's like several lessons there. Focus on yourself
It's a tough
first,
thing because
and then-
I'm certainly guilty of constantly saying things as a knee-jerk reaction because I've been conditioned to think a certain way, you know? I don't cry in front of people. Like, I hate it, you know? And I sometimes think like, sometimes they're like, oh, Eugene, you should try to cry more in videos. People love to see you feel things. And I'm like, no, I fucking hate feeling things because so much in me is like, no. But then I can imagine, what if I saw like my son or daughter crying? You know,
Sure.
Would I just tell them to stop crying, or, you know, or it would be
Depends
like,
on the situation.
yeah, but it's certainly where that comes from for me. It's not just about the kid. It's about like where have I come from and why am I thinking that?
Sure.
And I think that's kind of like, yeah, it really just comes back to parents and just anyone in a family structure should treat themselves as themselves first.
Yeah, I think that's definitely key, right? It's like kind of the same idea of if obviously life isn't this, but if the plane's going down, you put the mask on yourself first.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, you can lose your identity and just become this other thing. Regarding kids though, I'm not one of these
Oh my
people.
God, that plane analogy is great, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really
it's
solid
against,
at them.
well, it's against your instinct, but if you pass out before, you have to put it on yourself first to take care of someone else.
That, and it's also like I've lived my life, and I know that I might have like a closer relationship with my boys and be able to keep like my marriage together, and maybe everything is great. But also at 21, there's part of me that kind of wants him to go like, I love you, Dad, but fuck off. I'm going to go be my own person. So it's understanding like I still have to live with me. Me and my wife are going to still be together. And then regarding the raising, I think I'm not one of these people that wears the shirt that says like raise boys and girls the same. Like I'm not on like a mountaintop, but it's like if my kid wants to, like he plays soccer, great. If he wants to dress up like a princess, I don't fucking care. It's not like it's not like saying no to one of those things is actually going to change who he is. Yeah. You know? I don't know. But
no, it's tough. I think it's tough. I can never imagine what it's like to be a parent. You know, it's just, you have so much writing on how you're raising your kids. Like,
I think if you said like you had a general idea or anyone had a general idea, most of them are going to be wrong. Like unless you came from a family with like 10 kids, and I've got a few Catholic friends that are like that. But yeah.
But I mean, everyone has their own fair share of like neuroses, right? That came from them. You know what my thing is also is I just hope that people impart their unique neuroses that are not necessarily like detrimental, but like fun on your kids, right?
I also feel like, I feel like you
like
have
some
to,
uniqueness, right? You don't want everyone to be
some trauma,
homogenized, right? Yeah.
You need a little trauma.
Like I will stand by this. I grew up in a cutthroat competitive household with my sisters. We had to be like better than each other. I don't think I'll be able to like resist pitting my kids against each other, even if it's just in my own like evil villain lair way, just to see
it might be
how they react with each other.
I feel like, but your parents were coming up at a time where there wasn't as much entertainment, and that was probably something for them.
Well, this is going to be my form of entertainment as dad, I'm sure.
Eugene, thanks so much.
Yeah, and if you ever want me to come punch you in the face for the first time, let me know.
I don't know if I could handle it.
Hey, thanks so much for watching this podcast. If you made it to the end of the video, you like this, you want more in your life, after you hit that like button, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Right now, we got one brand new video every week. Also, if you don't want to watch my dumb face with the fantastic faces coming on, you can also click that link in the description down below, and you can listen to us in all the good audio podcast places like Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Is that a thing? I don't know. I don't really listen to podcasts off of Apple Podcasts. But apparently 51% of you do. So we're also there. Okay, bye.